Hey folks, this is Jex Thomas, writer and designer of the game Bump in the Dark, a tabletop role-playing game about community, chosen family, occult investigation, and showdowns with the gnarliest monsters you can imagine in an alternate version of the mid-1990s. Today I'd like to talk to you about how to set up and run a one-shot in the system. This advice also applies to running the game at a convention, doing a test game with your regular table to see how it goes, etc. Now, this video is directed at the Keeper, which is what Bump in the Dark calls the Game Master or DM. There will be more content coming soon directed at Hunters, that's the players, so you can be on the lookout for that. But this video is going to assume that you're running the game and that you generally understand the mechanics of the game, how Forged in the Dark plays differently from something like D&D or even Powered by the Apocalypse, how to use a clock, how to assess impact, how to pick consequences, how gear works, all that stuff. I'd love to go through all of that in depth, and maybe we'll make some videos later, but for now it's beyond the scope of this video. So if you don't know, pause the video, read the book, or ask questions in the comments, or head over to the Bump Discord server, really great resource, and then come back and finish the video. The first thing you'll need to do when setting up a one-shot is choosing a hunt. You could decide to write your own, but for a one-shot, I'd really recommend running one that's been prepared for you. If you head over to jexjthomas.itch.io, I've set up a collection on Itch, and there are a bunch of hunts to choose from. Some are written by me, while others are written by community members. The average price for a hunt is, I would say, like $2, and some of them are even free. If I can say so, I think there are a lot of really cool, really great hunts out there, so look through them and decide what interests you. This is the page for Beneath the Ice by Imp in a Sweater on Itch. The page will usually tell you the hook, give you a description about what might come up in play, and probably include some potential content warnings. And I say potential just because the nature of the game is that you could run the same hunt for 100 different tables and it will look different every time. But typically there are certain topics that are more likely to come up. Now, I have a hunt called Welcome to Last Pine, which is available in the back of the book or as part of a 3-hunt bundle for free on Itch. So let's use that one. It's meant to be a good kind of first hunt. I'll help you get oriented to the hunt format a little later, but first, let's talk about the other really important thing when you decide to run a one-shot. Getting everyone on board. Oftentimes, the first thing you have to do when running a one-shot is finding people to play with and setting expectations. Maybe this is asking your home table to try something new, or running a game at your local friendly gaming store. Maybe you're submitting an event to run at a con. Whatever the case, there's a really straightforward tool that I like to use that kind of gets everyone on the same page and really get informed consent so that people can make good decisions about whether this is the game for them and how to have the most fun during the play experience. That tool is called CATS, C-A-T-S. It's by Patrick O'Leary. CATS is available freely online as part of the 200-word RPG challenge on GitHub, as well as part of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit organized by Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk. I will post links to both of those down in the description. So CATS is really a framework for facilitating the kind of conversation we're talking about here. You don't have to use it, or you might find this just codifying how you already approach pitching new games. But I do think it can be a very useful way to frame a play experience, set expectations. CAT stands for concept, aim, tone, and subject matter. Concept. Here's where we're actually pitching the game. High level, what's this game about? How detailed do you think you need to get is up to you, but I generally say something along these lines. Bump in the Dark is a game about people hunting monsters in a spooky small town in the year 1994. You are one of these monster hunters. You and the other hunters already know each other and have been working together for some time when the session begins. Over the course of the game, you'll collect clues, piece them together, and solve a supernatural mystery for which there is no predefined solution. Now, you might get some questions about that last part, so Be prepared to talk about the structure of a hunt and how the showdown roll works. We're going to go in depth on those a little bit later. But for now, you can say something like, as keeper, I've prepared a scenario with a hook to pull you in, some interesting NPCs who might have some kind of connection to the mystery, some potential complications for when you roll a miss or a weak hit, a countdown clock that you're racing against, and finally a list of clues. Depending on the kind of hunt you're running, you might say something to the effect of, I haven't created a specific monster for you to fight against. Using the clues you'll find, we'll discover together and play what the monster is. Or maybe, I've prepared some monsters, but not a solution for what's really going on in the hunt. That'll be up to you to figure out by pulling the clues together in a way that makes sense to you. Then we'll roll dice to see if you are right. Aim. What are the players trying to accomplish? Can you win or lose? What kind of story are you trying to tell? You might say something like this. We're going to investigate a supernatural mystery and try to stop the monster, or monsters plural, or the people really behind things, etc., before too many people get hurt. This means that more than likely we're going to engage in an action-packed showdown like the kind you might see in Buffy or Supernatural. Now, these are all important, but I think that this one is especially important since Bump in the Dark can accommodate a fairly wide range of tones. The default is pretty dark and gritty, but only occasionally bleak. I think in a regular session of Bump, there should be humor, moments of levity, slice of life realness to help those sort of dark bits feel earned and hit harder. That said, you are going to work with your table to dial in the tone that feels right for you. This can be a simple conversation, or if you'd like, you can use the safety sheet included in the free play kit, which includes a section called tone dials, which are kind of like sliders for the tone of the game. Do you want the game to be more gonzo or gritty? Heroic or horror? Is violence relatively harmless or is it deadly? The difference between a Scooby-Doo game and a Supernatural game, pretty big, right? So if our game were a movie or TV show, what would it be rated? And kind of like I hinted at, even talking about which of the genre touchstones your game is leaning into can be really helpful. Is the game more like Buffy or X-Files? Maybe it's Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Does it have some Twin Peaks or Riverdale style melodrama? These are important discussions to have, and I find that this is usually a great way to kind of get everyone on the same page. Finally, subject matter. We will talk about what kinds of ideas are going to come up in play. Is there anything that someone might be really excited about? Is there anything that someone might find uncomfortable? Does the hunt come with any content warnings? Discuss and set boundaries. Here I'll usually say something like, by default, this game features paranormal, demonic, and psychological horror. Additional themes that some might find difficult include found family, othering, redemption, the supernatural, and sacrifice. Think about the kind of stuff they explore in Buffy, Supernatural, The X-Files, and so on. Now, if you're going to be running Welcome to Last Pine, you might mention that the session is likely to include reference to child endangerment, mass disaster, animal tax, and religious abuse. Finally, I always use this as a place to discuss what safety tools we're going to be using as well. On the safety sheet, there's a big list of potential themes that might come up in play. Are there going to be any in particular that you're most interested in exploring? Are there any that you're like, no, that's okay? At this point, I also go over which safety tools we're going to be using. I generally always use the X card and the O card. I tend to use lines and veils as well. I also explain that players can always slow down to discuss things. They can always take a break for any reason. They can always say no to something that feels uncomfortable or goes too far. There's using that X card. They can always say yes to what they enjoy, which is using the O card. Or they can leave the table if they need to for any reason whatsoever. None of these will be judged or shot down, and these also apply to you as the keeper. If it's with my regular table, we'll use lines and veils to establish some soft and hard boundaries. If there's anyone who's unfamiliar, Lines and Veils is a tool created by Ron Edwards that helps players establish boundaries. Lines are hard limits. This is the stuff that the players, and that, again, that includes you, right, don't want to engage with in the game. This stuff won't happen in the game at all. Not even a reference. It's not happening off screen. Doesn't exist in the world of the game. Veils, on the other hand, are softer limits. This is the stuff that you don't really want to zoom in on, but it's okay if it's happening off screen. Maybe it's referenced or implied, but not shown. My friend Jesse has a really good way, I think, to introduce this idea. He'll say something along the lines of, one way to think about this is if you ever watch an old movie, we see a couple kiss and then it fades out, and when we fade back in, they're both smoking cigarettes. We all know what happened without having to see it on the screen. Now, for tables of strangers or at conventions, I might use something more like the taste menu, which is a little bit quicker. Just draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left side, write the word yes or okay, and then have your folks, including yourself, jot down some things that you're interested in exploring. And then on the right side, write the word no or not okay, and then some things that you know you're not interested in exploring. And if there are any conflicts, like for instance, one person writes gore on the yes side and another writes gore on the no side, that subject's just not going to show up in the game, right? We'll default to going with what people feel comfortable with, right? Now, that free play kit also includes that safety page like we talked about. And so on that safety page, there's a place to list the themes that you're interested in exploring, that set of tone dials we talked about, that list of what the players can always do, a place to write down your lines and veils, and a list of potentially sensitive subjects that could be lines or veils for some people. With this, remember that as GM, you're a player too. I know I say this a lot, but I think it's really important. These tools aren't just for the other players, they're there to help keep you engaged as well. And if you have any questions about specific safety tools, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Now, after having that CATS conversation, everyone should be on the same page for the game, have the same expectations. The discussion doesn't need to be long, but it's really important, so take like 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the start of the session to go through CATS and your safety tools. From there, you'll usually go into hunter creation. For a one-shot, I highly, highly recommend using the quick start sheets, which simplifies the character sheet a little bit and includes like pick lists and predetermined elements to make character creation go faster, like beliefs, drive, abilities already picked out for you. There's going to be a playbook ability, a monstrous ability that the player can activate by choosing to mark Doom, as well as a pact ability. Now, for one shot, you're not going to bother with doing actual pact creation, but I think it's fun to give them a pact ability that they share and can use in play. So here you can see actually one of the Quick Start Hunter sheets. As you can see, it contains all the main rules that players need to know, as well as a few different choices they make. Other character creation choices like picking an ability, assigning action dots, are intentionally left out of the process in the interest of time. Of course, if you want to go through the entire character creation process, you can. This might be really good for your own table or when you don't have any time constraints. I also then introduce the action roll. Give a rundown of the action roll and how it works. Hunters will face challenges and obstacles which they will try to overcome by taking risky actions. When this happens, they choose what approach they're taking to the challenge, and then they take up a number of 6-sided dice equal to the action that fits the approach. Remember, they get to decide the action they're rolling. As keeper, you're not calling for, say, a sneak check. Instead, the player is going to tell you that they're sneaking. You will let them know what kind of impact they can expect to have, however, and you can say that one approach would have less impact than another. For example, yeah, you could try to scramble here, but I think with all those guards up ahead, it's pretty dangerous. You're probably not going to get very far. So then they can go ahead and try to change their approach. Oh, okay, let me try to sneak instead. Would that have better impact? They can also always decide to improve their impact by taking on more risk or decrease the risk by reducing their impact. These options are called going for broke and playing it safe. Whenever they go for broke, remind them to mark hope, which is like their XP that they can spend at the end of the session on an epilogue scene or two. I'm going to be honest, when I'm running a one-shot or a con game, I usually leave out the ability to play it safe. unless someone specifically asks if there's a way to take on less risk. I find it's typically more fun to take on more risk and get those bigger impacts than taking on less. They also get to add 1 die if they either push their luck or accept a deal with the darkness. You can't do both. It has to be one or the other. And they can always turn down a deal. So just hearing one doesn't, you're not on the hook for anything. They can hear one, they can say no, and decide to push themselves instead, or not even get any bonus dice. They can also get an extra die if another hunter marks luck to help them. Now, when they roll their dice, the results are based on the highest die they roll. A 6 is a success, or what we call a strong hit. You do it. Describe how. 2 or more 6s is a critical hit, and you get increased impact. A 4 or 5 is a weak hit. It means that they succeed, but there's also a consequence. And 1 to 3 is a miss. It means they don't succeed, and there's going to be 1 or more consequences. This is the worst result. Be sure to remind them that they can use actions that they don't have any action dots in. When you have 0 dice in an action, you simply roll 2 dice and take the lower result. The action roll is the most important thing for the players to know before starting, and you're probably going to walk them through the process step by step at least a few times throughout the session. That's okay. It's a clearly written step-by-step procedure for a reason. Other mechanics like resisting consequences or taking conditions can be introduced as they come up in play. Now, after choosing a hunt, going over cats, creating hunters, introducing the action roll, you're ready to actually start the game. For a one-shot, try to plan to fit the entire hunt into one session, right? I've run sessions as short as an hour, which is pretty tight, as long as 4 hours or 5 hours. When I'm running the game at cons or for like an online community like Open Hearth, I will usually schedule a 3-hour session. I think 2 to 3 hours works just fine, but if you're with a table of folks who really like to role play and chew the scenery, no shade, this is what my home table is like, and I love it. But if that's you, you're going to want to go 3 or 4. If you know the folks you're playing with, you'll have a good sense of this. If you're playing with strangers, I feel like asking for more of their time than like 3 hours is a pretty big ask. I often let players know that we'll be taking brief breaks at the top of every hour. Usually 5 minutes is enough to take care of biological needs and stretch, whatever. One other important consideration when running a one-shot is that you might need to force the showdown roll so that you can make sure to get through both parts of the hunt. I typically let the players know before we start that when we're down to like 45 minutes, we're going to go right to the showdown roll regardless of whether the countdown clock is full or the hunters feel ready to develop a theory. Players are generally cool with this because they want to see all the parts of the game. You also want to save a little bit of time at the end for assigning hope, that XP, and doing brief epilogues. You can adjust when you want to jump to the showdown roll depending on what kind of ratio to investigation to showdown you want. For a more combat-heavy game, you might want to cut to the showdown with 45 minutes remaining or even an hour remaining. For that more role-play-heavy game, investigation-heavy game, maybe it's 30 minutes, right? You'll get a good sense for that as you're running the game. Now let's do a quick orientation to the hunt. Most published hunts use the same format, published as a 2-sided trifold pamphlet. Now the most important thing to look at first is the hook. It's a brief description of the inciting incident. What is the mystery the hunters are investigating? The way you present the hook to the hunters can vary, but it's always a summary of what's known about the situation going in. Who presents it doesn't matter nearly as much as the hunters just having that information. Maybe it's an important NPC that reaches out to the hunter. Maybe you hard frame a scene where a hunter is in the middle of the action and you catch them up during the scene. Or maybe they hear about it while they're out and about. Or maybe, I like doing this, maybe you write a short scene as a cold open to show the audience, the other players, what has happened. Or you can just read it to them out of character, which is probably the easiest and most reliable way to do it. Again, the most important thing is that the hunters actually have this information so they can start investigating. I can say for myself, I sometimes will make the mistake of kind of loosely playing out scenes and just waiting for a good opportunity to drop the hook in. This is dangerous because it might take you a while to get there, or the hunters might even start investigating before they're even heard the hook. And the hunter should never ever have to roll to get information that's part of the hook. Everything from the hook should be freely available to them. Next, let's take a look at the countdown clock. The countdown clock basically shows how close the situation is to going bad or getting out of the hunter's control. A typical hunt has a 6-step countdown clock. Investigation and the showdown are relatively balanced. An 8-step clock is slower paced with lots of breathing room, emphasizing the investigation over the action. And a 4-step clock, on the other hand, is breakneck, fast-paced. Things can break bad at any moment, disaster is imminent, and the investigation to showdown ratio likely favors the showdown. It probably goes without saying that you're probably not going to do an 8-step clock for a one-shot. I prefer a 4-step clock for one-shots. Sometimes I'll even change a 6-step clock to a 4-step one to help things along. As you can see here, the countdown for Welcome to Last Pine is a 6-step clock. Beneath the clock are consequences that happen as the clock ticks up. Usually the first one will be around the halfway point, then when it's 2/3 full or 3/4 full, and then again when it's full. For this hunt, it's at 2 ticks, 4 ticks, and then 6 ticks. Now, if you're coming to Bump in the Dark with experience running something like Monster of the Week, I just want to highlight that these consequences are designed to happen no matter what. If the clock gets filled, the consequence happens. This is very different than the countdown in Monster of the Week, which represents what happens if the hunters don't get involved. Part of this is related to how the games are structured differently. In Monster of the Week, the hunters likely already know what the monster is, and they're already working to stop it. And one of the main things they're investigating to find out is what the monster's weakness is. In Bump, you're probably starting out with less information, and working to stop the monster generally happens once you've made the showdown roll. Countdowns in Monster of the Week are an evolution of fronts from the first edition of Apocalypse World. Fronts in Apocalypse World and countdowns in Monster of the Week are fundamentally conceptual and help you better understand the threat or monster and what it wants. In Bump, countdowns are fundamentally mechanical and exist to drive the action forward, give you something to race against. The inside of the pamphlet lists people of interest, so NPCs for the hunters to interact with and that help move the investigation forward. These NPCs include witnesses, victims, suspects, bystanders, people trying to get in the way, and so on. Hunts usually have 3 to 6 named NPCs that are described with a role. This is like their job or place in the community or role in the mystery. Pronouns, a few characteristics that describe how they behave or what they look like, and finally a quote that they're likely to say when encountered by the hunters for the first time. This quote doesn't have to come up. It's just an example to help you get a feel for the character and to fall back on if you need help role-playing them or thinking of what information they might try to share with the hunters. Next, you have a list of example complications. These describe problems and situations that the hunters can see and react to. They help drive the action forward at the start of the hunt. They help prevent kind of ponderous over-planning by the players. And as a keeper, you can inject these complications into the hunt as you see fit, but generally you'll be using them as consequences when the hunters roll a miss or a weak hit on their action rolls. You don't have to use these specific complications if you don't want, or you can use a mix of these and your own that you've come up with on the spot in a response to what's happening in the moment during a hunt. Finally, importantly, we have a list of clues. Without these, nothing can happen. Most hunts have a list of 9 or so clues, and these clues broadly fall into 3 types. Clues that help the hunters identify who or what is responsible for the situation, clues that help explain the motivation or objective, and clues that help the hunters determine how best to deal with the situation and contain the creature or phenomenon. These clues might include evidence, witnesses, theories, myths, rumors. Most hunts don't list the clues by type because it's actually going to be up to the hunters to figure out how to use them to answer the showdown questions. There's also a 4th kind of clue, the void clue. which is about a bigger dark conspiracy happening in the background. These usually aren't relevant in a one shot, but I think they can be fun to sprinkle in to add a little mystery, dread, weird occurrences, that kind of thing. One thing that I think it's really important to consider is that in Bump, there should be an obstacle in front of every clue. If you're coming from other games that involve investigation, this might take some adjustment. Let's talk about this through the lens of investigating in a Powered by the Apocalypse game. For example, Monster of the Week's investigation move has the trigger when you investigate a mystery. In Monster of the Week, just performing the act of investigation is itself a trigger for the move. Or in Brindlewood Bay, a game that's heavily inspired Bump's approach to mysteries, it's when you search for a clue, conduct research, or otherwise gather information. That's how you find a clue, by hitting that trigger, then rolling the dice. In Bump, on the other hand, there's no investigate a mystery or meddling move. There's no gathering information, discern realities, etc. There's no perception check, for that matter. If we were to put the Forged in the Dark action roll in the framework of PBTA-style moves, Bump's main move is take a risky action, with the trigger when you attempt to overcome a dangerous obstacle. That is the part that we're interested in, more so than the particulars of the investigation. Now, of course, we are interested in how you're overcoming that obstacle. Is this a read roll, compel, connect? State your goal, I want to find a clue, and your approach, and then take up dice. But it's the danger, it's the overcoming of the danger that the game is most interested in. This doesn't mean you can't ever have a clue without an obstacle in front of it, but in that case, I think I would just give it to them. Or have a fortune roll, or instead of giving them a clue, give them information about an obstacle that's blocking a clue that they then have to go deal with. So keep this in mind. This also addresses a question that I'll sometimes get from players familiar with Brindlewood Bay and other carved from Brindlewood games. What do you mean you only need 3 clues? We'll talk a little more about this in a second, but part of this is that clues are far more dangerous to acquire in Bump in the Dark than they are in something like Brindlewood Bay. One of the most difficult things the keeper has to deal with in Bump in the Dark is contextualizing the clues as they're discovered. We probably could, and maybe should, make a video just on this concept alone, but just remember that because there's no set solution, you'll need to work to make the clues fit the developing narrative, not the other way around. You might have an idea about what a certain clue means, or even an idea about where the hunters might find it, and then as you're playing you realize, oh no, this is actually the perfect place, right? And you have to think on your feet to make it work in that context. Think about how that clue might be uncovered if the hunters are investigating via interrogating or interviewing a witness. What if they're physically searching a location, using a special ability like Networked or Voices from Beyond? What uncovering a clue will look like will vary depending on the context of how the hunters are investigating and what makes sense in the moment. For example, Welcome to Last Pine contains the clue, small shrine made of human teeth. This clue is evocative, but also very open-ended. What does it mean? It probably makes most sense for the hunters to find this while physically investigating. Maybe they're in the basement of the Guilty River Tabernacle and they find it in a corner. Or maybe it's down in one of the tunnels that connect the sinkholes. Maybe it's in the pastor's bedroom. It's not hard to imagine the hunters coming upon this shrine and picking up on it as a clue. But what if they're talking to a witness? One of the NPCs, Samantha Locke, was along on the trip and just awoke from a coma. The hunters go to the hospital and interview her. After rolling a strong hit on a connect, successfully empathizing with Samantha in hopes that she'll reveal more about what she remembers, maybe Samantha reveals that she remembers being dragged down a tunnel and that before passing out she remembers seeing something. No, that doesn't make sense. Was it a shrine made of teeth? No, that can't possibly be right, but I'm sure that's what I saw. What if you have a scourge who wants to use Voices from Beyond to attune to the dark whispers of the void? Maybe they are led to a location or receive a vision where the word teeth as a chilling whisper in their ear, only to look up and realize that they just drew a picture of the shrine on a nearby piece of paper without even realizing they were doing it. Or maybe they find the clue as a drawing someone else did, or as a photograph tucked away in a musty old book. Maybe they're researching at the library and find a description of it in a book. The possibilities are pretty much endless. Part of contextualizing a clue also includes thinking about impact. Reduced and increased impact should both affect the clues hunters find. So let's say they find that shrine made of teeth, but they rolled a weak hit, so you give them reduced impact as a consequence. You can't just not give them a clue, right? Right, but you can say that it's not going to count mechanically as a clue until they investigate further. Or maybe they just find one tooth, but they can see that it has some kind of solvent or adhesive on it. Maybe it's something they can only investigate from the safety of their base, but once they do, then it becomes a capital C clue. Or maybe they find a book, but they have to translate it, and when they do, there's a description of the shrine. Or that photo they found is blurry, but they can tell where it is, and if they go there, they will find the shrine. When reducing impact, it's a good idea to give them something that leads to a mechanical clue. They'll have to work a little harder, but they still have direction. You should never take away or undo a success, but as a consequence, you can always say that there's more left to be done. Now, for increased impact, you can go a couple of routes. Maybe the easiest is to just give them 2 clues. Or you can add more context. Maybe you tie the clue to someone specific or describe how it connects to something else. Or give them a lead on the next clue. Hopefully you can see how important it is to contextualize clues. A big part of being a keeper for Bump in the Dark is thinking on your feet and contextualizing clues on the spot. It's important to remind your players that unlike other mystery games, clues are not a trail of breadcrumbs to follow, leading to some preordained solution, right? Instead, they are a web that they will pull together by coming up with a theory and making the showdown roll. But how many clues do they actually need to do that? Technically, you only need 3 to get all 3 dice, but I think that this is overly mechanistic and not necessarily a helpful way to look at things. I think the hunter should try to acquire as many clues as it takes for them to feel like they're able to put together a reasonable theory. That might only be 3, and that's fine. Or it could be 8 or 9. That's okay too. And really getting 8 or 9 clues is going to be incredibly dangerous, so they've really earned the right to make that showdown roll at that point. In a regular game of Bump in the Dark, there are 2 triggers for the showdown roll. When the players feel ready to come up with a theory, or when the countdown clock fills, whichever happens first. In a one-shot, you're going to add a 3rd trigger. If the showdown roll hasn't happened and there's only 30, 45 minutes, whatever minutes left, it's time for the showdown so that the players get to see the part of the game that they haven't gotten to see yet. So the players just spent an hour or 2 exploring locations, interviewing witnesses, researching, finding evidence, and so on. When it's time for the showdown roll, they're going to work together to organize the clues into a theory that answers the 3 showdown questions. As keeper, feel free to make your own suggestions about what's going on, because you'll have been coming up with your own theories as you've been going too, but remember that your ideas do not carry any more weight than the other players, and your ideas are not the right or canonical ones. Players will then take up 1 die for each question they can answer using at least 1 unique clue. Individual clues can be used to answer multiple questions, but each clue can only contribute to the dice pool 1 time. That means the most dice they'll have for the showdown roll is 3. The questions are, what is the creature or phenomenon? What does it want, or why is it here or happening? And how can it be hurt, killed, or otherwise dealt with? Some hunts might have alternate showdown questions, but for now we're just going to focus on these. You will want to encourage your players to explore interesting theories while also being mindful of time. Remind them it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to count for everything as long as they're able to answer the questions. They need to name it, explain it, and contain it. So let's look at a theory here for that Welcome to Last Pine hunt. Some kind of multi-dimensional burrowing teeth monster summoned by the pastor of the Guilty River Tabernacle to enact revenge on the Grand Soot Hill mining concern. That's the collapsed tunnels and the teeth shrine that point to what it is, and the strange glyphs they found that they're assuming are the summoning glyphs. The broken salt circles and industrial floodlights suggest that maybe salt circles can contain it, and it doesn't like harsh lights. From there, they come up with a plan to blind it, bind it and send it back to where it came from. Going back to the showdown roll, they're rolling all 3 dice here. And let's say they roll a 6 as their highest result. Their theory is correct, their plan makes sense. We're going to cut to them enacting the plan. Let's say it was a crit instead. Well, not only was their theory correct, but maybe they have the upper hand. They caught Pastor Richter in a lie or off guard. The guard at the tabernacle is sleeping, something like that. Maybe they find evidence that Grand Soothill actually wanted Richter to summon the monster, and that's all part of a bigger plan. On a weak hit, they will have drawn some incorrect conclusions. So what's fun here? Maybe the salt circles don't contain the monster. They were broken, after all. So they're going to have to figure something else out, and we might cut to the action in medias res as they're learning this, or we might back it up a bit and let them find out at a crucial moment. Now, if they roll a miss, hit them as hard as you want to. Teeth monster? Are you kidding me? No, what they summoned is an angel. And Richter doesn't want revenge on the mining concerns. He wants to purify the people of Iron Country with celestial fire. When we cut to the action, something has already gone very wrong. So maybe we come in on a much-loved NPC in harm's way. Or the angel has already started doing its fiery cleansing, starting with the innocent congregation at the tabernacle. What do you do? Now, as you heard, if they roll a weak hit or miss, you get to show them what they got wrong. In a longer game, you might actually all work together to decide what they got wrong, but for a one-shot or con game, definitely just show them. You don't want to be unfair or punishing, but this is your chance to make a hard move. Then the actual showdown phase is going to consist of them enacting their plan, whether that's combat, doing a special banishing ritual, confronting the executive from the mining concern who is really behind the hauntings, whatever else. You'll want to be mindful of time, and depending on how much time you have, you might want to let them resolve the showdown in just a couple of rolls, maybe 1 roll for each player. You'll probably be framing scenes pretty hard to cut right to the action. This is the biggest difference from a game where you don't have a time limit or you can just pick up again next week. In those cases, you'll probably have more room for the showdown, but I find that even in truncated form, the showdown can be still very action-packed and rewarding. Now, after the showdown, you can move into the Fallout phase. For the sake of a one-shot or a convention game, you're not going to assign alarm or gather strings, those other kind of parts of the Fallout phase. Instead, you're going to assign hope to each player based on the triggers on their sheets. Along with the hope they marked, during the hunt, whenever they went for broke, they'll spend their hope on 1 or more epilogue beats. As long as you're using those quick start hunter sheets, each sheet has a list of epilogue beats. These are meant to be prompts that the player can then create a scene around. They are intentionally pretty general and pretty adaptable. They can do as many scenes as they have hope to buy, though you should probably have the hunters take turns, so everyone gets a chance to go before someone goes again. And that's how to run a one-shot of Bump in the Dark. I know this was a longer video, and even with it being a longer video, I probably missed something important, but hopefully this is complete enough that you feel confident and able to run the game for your friends or at a convention. If you have any lingering questions, absolutely leave a comment or come join us on the Bump in the Dark Discord server. I'll be back with a couple more videos over the next couple of weeks, so keep a lookout for those. Right, thanks for listening, and don't forget that you can back the revised edition of Bump in the Dark on BackerKit from now until July 7th. Head over to bumpinthedarkrpg.com or click the link in the description for more information.